Hello, my name's Auntie Eva, and it gives me great pleasure today to be reading a story called Wizard Grey and the Journey of Magic. This has been written by Zephyr, a South Australian primary school student, and this story has won him the place as a finalist in the Creator Book Challenge. Well done, Zephyr. Let's listen to your magical story. The blue moon shone and the wolves were howling. Deep in the forest, a log cabin stood. Smoke arose from the chimney, for inside lived a great wizard named Wizard Grey. But this night it was a blue moon, the only time he was able to make blood dust, which was as red as rose and as smooth as silk. But what might this potion do, you might ask? Well, it is an elixir to life. And why was he making this potion? Well, you see, this man did not live alone. He had a wife named Witch Starrock. She was also a great witch, but she was ill and slowly dying. Wizard Grey had been making potion after potion, yet none of them had worked. What they didn't know was that on the other side of the wood stood a castle, and in that castle lived a king whom loved Witch Starrock. He had seen her in the meadow gathering nettle, but he knew that Wizard Grey would not give her up. He did, however, know someone who was enemies with Wizard Grey, and he said, "If Wizard Grey will not give me that woman, I will have to kill her. But I do not have the power, so I will get Devil Heart to do it." He then asked Devil Heart to do the job, and he was delighted. "I will do it with ease," he said. "But what is my payment?" "Well, what do you desire?" asked the king. "Gold," replied Devil Heart. "Plenty of gold." "Yes, yes, I have plenty of that stuff," replied the king with a greedy glint in his eye. Later that evening, Wizard Grey was sitting in his chair having visions, terrible ones. In fact, they were so bad he was crying. But when he heard his wife was coughing, he got up and hurried to his room. Frankincense was burning, and the fire in the corner of the room was almost out. "My dear Starrock, are you okay?" said Wizard Grey. "Yes, but I think I know the reason I am unwell," replied Starrock. "What, my dear, why?" called Grey. "I think it may be a curse." The room went silent. Then finally Starrock spoke. "I think we need to see Grandmother Fortune." The next morning they set off through the woods. On the way they met many of the forest folk, like Mr. and Mrs. Oak, sitting picking saffron caps. Then they met Miss Boggypond, who always stunk of pondweed. Soon that evening they came by a cabin. It belonged to Grandmother Fortune, so they rushed in. Grandmother Fortune was sitting at a table edged with diamonds, and a crystal ball sat in the middle. She was staring at it as if in a trance. Suddenly she spoke. "Why do you seek someone as wise as me?" she said in a misty voice. "Well," said Starrock, "I am terribly, terribly ill, but I think I know what is wrong." "Ah, do you now?" said Grandmother Fortune. "Well, I have seen this king watching me as I am gathering nettles, and 2 weeks ago he sent 3 servants to help me." "What?" said Wizard Grey. "You didn't tell me about this." "I didn't know how you would take this news," replied Starrock, and she continued to talk of the king and his extravagant castle. "Well," said Grandmother Fortune, "it seems you will have to go to that castle." "Yes, replied Star Rock. Do you mind if we stay the night? Of course, there's a spare room upstairs. I will make the bed. And she shuffled stiffly up a large crooked staircase. Dear Star Rock, said Grey, I want you to have this. And he handed her something small and heavy. My mother gave it to me when I was young. It was made from silver, and engraved upon it was a small mouse. It will glow when your enemy is around. And suddenly it did start to glow. Grandmother Fortune walked in pale-faced and trembling and said quietly, There is someone here to see you, Star Rock. Grey looked out of the window and gasped, and told Star Rock to climb out the back window. So she did, and she ran. Grey stood boldly and asked what the men wanted. But these were no ordinary men. They were some of the king's soldiers who were mean and cruel. Suddenly they pushed Grey and handcuffed him. They took Grandmother Fortune and pulled them both away by horse and cart. Meanwhile, Star Rock had been watching and fell down crying until nightfall, when she realised she'd best be going to make a hut for the night. She knew it wouldn't be safe for her to stay in Grandmother Fortune's house that night. She went about gathering sticks and logs and built a small hut. At the king's castle, his guests had arrived. Grey and Grandmother Fortune were led into a huge hall with at least 6 chandeliers and 10 fireplaces, 5 on each side. The king sat waiting, and next to him was someone who looked familiar to Wizard Grey. As they drew closer, he saw that it was Devil Heart, his nemesis. Wizard Grey shouted, What is the meaning of this? Devil Heart's eyes glowed bright as the guard struggled to keep Grey still, but Grandmother Fortune just stood there, pale-faced. The king stood up rather awkwardly. My royal healer has just passed away, so you, old woman, will be my healer now. Grandmother Fortune pursed her lips, then said, You don't suspect I have other duties at home? The king sat and was silent for a second and then looked beside him at Devil Heart, as if he'd forgotten for a moment that he was protected. He stood back up and said, Devil Heart, I think our guests have forgotten their manners. Devil Heart raised his hand and Grandmother was thrown back and landed to the ground, severely hurt. The king whispered to a nearby guard, I think they need a little time to think about this occasion. Wizard Grey and Grandmother Fortune were led to a gloomy and dusty dungeon. They feared they may be there for some time. Witch Star Rock had slowly made her way to a nearby village. She was selling medicinal herbs which she had found in the forest. Each day, as she was selling her remedies, she became more and more aware she was being watched by some soldiers after she spotted one behind a large oak tree. One day a young soldier approached her. What might you be selling, milady? Star Rock knew she shouldn't be talking to anyone like that, so she picked up her basket and fled. She only got halfway down the street when she was grabbed and thrown into an old brown sack. All the nearby villagers stood by, helpless as she was carried away. Witch Star Rock sat in the old brown sack for at least 3 days, until at last she was let into a big courtyard. 2 guards took her by the arms and carried her roughly to the big grand hall. This king sat there with a huge grin upon his face. Devil Heart stood beside him. The king bellowed, Ah ha 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 ha! Witch Star Rock, my lovely, I've been waiting to see you. Witch Star Rock stood there astonished. The king continued. That's right, you're going to marry me. The wedding will be tomorrow. Witch Star Rock shouted angrily. I will not marry you. That is the last thing I would do by far. The king frowned. Devil Heart leant forward to hurt Witch Star Rock, but the king held out his hand to stop him. No, Devil Heart, he remarked. She is mine to deal with. Witch Star Rock shouted back. Why must you marry me? The king grinned. Well, I want to be very powerful, and I want you there beside me, beautiful creature. Witch Star Rock scowled. Where is my grey? What have you done with him? Oh, he will be perfectly fine, provided you just marry me, said the king. I will not, I will not, I will not. The king said to a nearby guard, If this is how it is to be, she shall be beheaded tomorrow. Take her to the dungeon for the night. Tomorrow she shall be taken to the village square. It was announced the following morning that a beheading would take place. Now, it wasn't every day that someone was beheaded, and so naturally there was some excitement in the air. But when Witch Star Rock was taken out, everyone gasped. People whispered to each other before a man in a black cloak and hood walked upon the stage and said, This lady, Witch Star Rock, has denied marrying the King of Oakland. When people realised what she was there for, they started shouting and screaming. Some people even tried to climb up on the stage. Then the man in the all-black suit gave Witch Star Rock a wink, to her surprise. The man then said, I must quickly consult with this woman, and he grabbed her and took her down from the stage before he quietly asked her, Are you ready? Witch Star Rock looked confused before he pulled her out of the tent they were in. Come with me, I'm going to save you. They snuck into a nearby cart down the street whilst the crowd was awaiting their return on the stage. Men started running out of their houses, chasing them with pitchforks and torches. One man shouted, Hey, that's my cart! Witch Star Rock was extremely confused as to why they had to steal the cart. After passing over orchard and field, they finally came to the Oakland Castle. Witch Star Rock suddenly felt that something wasn't right. Then the man in black turned to her. He realised Witch Star Rock knew where they were. He then grinned. I guess there's no point in disguising myself anymore. Witch Star Rock had to think for a second, then the figure changed to what she knew as Devil Heart. She tried to jump off the cart, but Devil Heart just caught her and threw her into a sack. Soon she felt the cart stop. She was pulled out of the sack and pushed over the courtyard to a set of big oak doors. The doors were pushed open and she found herself in the same hall. Wizard Grey and Grandmother Fortune were tied to a chandelier overhead. Witch Star Rock gasped and tried to use all of her strength of magic to get them down. Devil Heart stopped her, for he was more powerful. Wizard Grey shouted down to Witch Star Rock, You're going to have to defeat the king! Witch Star Rock stood silent for a moment, trying to think of what to do. She tried to blast the king from his chair. Suddenly, a blue bolt of lightning came at her side from Devil Heart. She was killed instantly. Wizard Grey shouted, Star Rock, my dear! And yet she lay there, still. Grandmother Fortune said nothing. Devil Heart stood beside the king. The king looked to him and said, I found one of your books of magic, and apparently, when a wizard or witch is killed, a mortal can use their magic. Devil Heart hesitated and then replied, Yes. And so the king, with one swift move, took a dagger from his robe and stabbed Devil Heart through his stone cold heart. The king sat with a huge smile on his face. Wizard Grey, you think you can defeat me? Wizard Grey blasted himself down from the ceiling along with Grandmother Fortune. The king, with his new-found powers, banished Wizard Grey and Grandmother Fortune to a faraway mountain. The king stood in his almighty power. That was a magical story. Thank you, Zephyr. Thank you for listening. Infinite love and gratitude.